Hey everybody, it's Irene with BrainStormAcres.
I'm Henry.
Yeah.
I'm here too.
Yeah, now what we were going to do today was...
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to do some Christmas cookies.
Right.
I made some treat cookies for Rufus yesterday, which
yep.
he likes.
Yep.
And then we're going to make some wontons.
Well, let's get the wontons done first because that's kind of gooey, and I'll wear my old apron, and then we'll take that off because it's meat. You know, you're working with more raw meat, so I like to be careful about, you know, the cookies. So, got the pork. Henry bought some really nice fresh pork yesterday that was ground. Got it all done this morning. He chopped up the green onions for me. I got all the other stuff together, mixed it together. Went in the fridge to grab the wonton wrappers.
Not a good sight.
They were green. Now, I have bought wonton wrappers probably for...
A while.
Yeah, 35, 40 years, and I have never had them get green. I have had them dry out to the point where you couldn't use them, or get gooey somehow, like they got wet. But I have never had them turn green, and these are not that old.
First time for everything.
Yeah. So we're like, well, that's not going to stop us because my options are...
We're not going to spoil that ground pork. It's really hard to find it in our area.
Right.
I've been looking for several months, and I finally found it. So I said, I'm going to get it. I got it.
Yep.
Let's make wontons.
Right. And what we'll do is we'll make a boatload of them, stick them in the freezer on trays, and then freeze them. And then you dump them into a Ziploc bag. And when you want some for a soup, you literally just start the soup on and toss them in, and by the time as soon as they float, they're done. So easy, quick dinner or lunch when you just want something warm, but not with green wonton wrappers. So yesterday I have been going through because there's different ways you can wrap wontons, and I was trying to, the last couple of times I've made them, they tasted perfectly, but I didn't like the way the wrappers looked as much. So I was looking at some of the other ways they recommended it, and I had just finished looking at that yesterday, so there was also a recipe for wonton wrappers there. And so this morning when these turned out to be green, I went and got the recipe for wonton wrappers because the person said, look, it's not hard. And I'm like, oh, you're just using a pasta maker. Well, I used to make pasta all the time.
Well, we haven't used the pasta maker in a long, long time. We actually have an electric motor that we can use to run the pasta maker, but we're not going to do all that sort of stuff right now.
Right.
But it's not going to take a whole lot of time to roll these wrappers out.
So right, wrappers are just basically flour and water, and then you let it sit. You knead it a little bit, and then you let it sit for a while, and then that's what it's underneath this bowl is. It's resting under there.
I'll put the recipe that we're using today in the show notes, so if you want to make your own wonton wrappers, you can do it
You can do it.
ours, or we'll also give you the information for the filling.
Right, right. So, like I said, normally I wouldn't make the wrappers, although I've thought about it because sometimes the wrappers are inconsistent depending on what brand you wind up with. Some of them are thicker than others, and I don't like the ones that are really thick. And so we'll see how good a job I can do today making them with a pasta maker. I dragged out my old pasta machine, and of course one of the pieces is missing because God knows how long it's been since I used it. But the hold down for the countertop that I would use with my tomato processing machine works fine with this one, which is what I thought it would. When I looked at it, I went, I bet that'll fit. So, and it'll show up somewhere. It's in a box somewhere.
It's been a good 17 or 18 years since we used that pasta maker.
Yeah.
It'll still work just fine. We've kept it clean.
It squeaks a little, but that's okay.
Well, you know, you'll go ahead and get going. I'm going to go get my jacket on so I don't get covered with stuff because you've got an apron.
Yeah. Well, this is my grudgy apron that I don't mind getting grudgier.
All right.
Okay.
Watch.
Okay, so I'm going to unload my pasta, which is sitting here on the board. And I'm going to cut it. It says use a quarter of it at a time. And one of the reasons you're only going to use a quarter of it at a time is you don't want to let it get too dried out. So I'm going to just sort of eyeball it and cut it with one of my lovely little cutter thingies. Bonk. And it says what you do to start it with is you roll it out. So I'm going to make it sort of hot dog shaped. And then I'm going to roll it out, and that'll be thin enough that I can use it in the pasta machine. Now, when you're dusting this, you don't dust with flour, you dust with cornstarch. And I happen to have good, guaranteed, no GMO cornstarch that I picked up at Sprouts grocery store. It's funny using cornstarch because, which they would call corn flour in Europe, because it squeaks between your fingers. It's a totally different texture than flour is. All I'm doing is rolling it out enough so that I'll be able to stuff it into a pasta machine by making it into a hot dog shaped sort of thing. It starts out with relatively straight shot size. It won't be perfect, but there are treats you can use the leftover wonton stuff with, so not too concerned about that. I don't pretend to be the greatest pasta maker or wonton maker, but should work, which is the whole point. Should be skinny enough to get into the pasta squisher. I have it open as far as it'll go, and I'm just going to run it through here. Every time I put it through, I am making the gap between the two rollers that make up the pasta machine narrower so that it's rolling it a little bit skinnier each time I do it. And according to the instructions I have, I do that until it gets to a level 5 on their pasta machine. Now, I don't know. Mine is the same brand, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what we think when we get there. And if it gets to be too unwieldy, you can always cut it into smaller pieces. So you could wind up, if you did this with a big piece, with something that was like 6 feet long, which would be a little awkward. Now, if I was finding that this was sticky, I could just dust it with more of the cornstarch to keep it from sticking. And it says roll it to 5. This is 5, and this is actually about the thickness that I would get from a commercially produced wonton wrapper, except it's more flexible. So this actually is going to be pretty cool. Now, if you want to be fussy, you can, at this point, choose to trim it up however you want it. There are different size wonton wrappers out there. Most of them in the United States are about 3 inches square, I guess. So I could make, like where this is a little wider, I could choose to make this into different sized pieces. And I could either use my cutter like this and just do that. There are also some wonton wrappers that are made round, but these are homemade. It's not going to make any difference. They're going to taste great anyway. And all I'm going to do is plop these here. They're not sticky, so I'm not too worried about it. And I will get the filling out of the fridge, and we'll start loading up wontons. And we can always make littler ones, we can make bigger ones, it doesn't matter. And no, they're not going to be perfectly machine made, but they might taste better than the machine made ones. What I usually do is take 2 spoons, and then I'll start with 2 spoons, and then as I work through, it depends on how the dough behaves as to how I leave it. So
Let me get some parchment paper for that tray.
okay. Is it running?
Yes.
Okay.
We're using parchment paper. It will keep the wontons from sticking to the tray. This is an ordinary baking tray.
Right. And sometimes I will fold the edges underneath to make it stiffer, because sometimes you'll find it's kind of annoying when you're trying to do something and you have parchment paper that's flooping all over the place. There we go. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to experiment with the size of the filling. Okay, I've got a little dollop of filling here. I'm going to stick it in the middle of this. And there's multiple ways to fold it. This is a little bit much for this particular size square, but I just turned it into a rectangle. I'm going to add water to the corner here, and I'm going to bend it around and do like that. Now, it'll look kind of like that from one end and kind of like that from the other end. Doesn't matter. There's a zillion ways. There's probably as many ways to fold wontons as there are people. But that's one way. Another way is is a triangle, like a kerchief sort of a thing, where you fold it up like this. Again, you're going to dampen that a little bit. Fold it over like that, and that's another way that you can do it. And you just stick them right next to one another on here, on your paper, and you're going to throw them in the freezer and let them freeze. And then you can plop them into plastic bags, and magically they'll be ready when you want wonton soup. And these are teeny little globs of wonton. I sometimes make much bigger ones. I haven't decided which way of folding I like best. But I do like the fact that this, sometimes the prepared wonton wrappers that I get are really brittle because they're too dried out. I'm making some here that are teeny. And if you've ever gone to buy wontons, you'll see quite a variety of sizes, depending on the brand and whether they're, how they expect you to use them or whatever. Another way that I have done them before is just to fold them up and sort of randomly, the way you would fold like a shumai or something like that, and it makes a little purse sort of a thing. It doesn't really matter which way you fold them. They're going to taste the same every way you fold them, which is delicious. So,
Okay, I'm going to move the camera.
It's just, yeah, I help.
Rufus is going to help.
Yeah.
He smells the meat.
Yeah, really. Except you can't have this. It's got onions in it. Okay, enough self-abuse for one day.
Not self-abuse. Irene did that set. I did this ugly set over here.
Yeah, they're both pretty ugly. But you know what? They're going to taste just fine. That's one of the things I learned a long time ago is when making this kind of stuff, it's going to taste just fine. Henry made one particular style. I made an assortment because I was sometimes using the scraps. So I would make what they call purses, which is where it's all gathered up at the top. I experimented with a bunch of different ones. They're lumpy as heck. We're going to throw them in the freezer. When they're frozen, they'll get thrown into a Ziploc. And when we want wonton soup, we can have it in 15 minutes.
Yeah, so we've cleaned up at least our hands.
Yep.
I had my coat off. We're going to make some space in the deep freeze, go stick these in there. We'll take them back out, probably about 2 hours and put them into a plastic bag so that they're available for us to cook when we want them.
Yeah. I mean, it takes about 15, 20 minutes max between I get the things of broth that you make, the quart jars of 2 quart jars of broth or 2 pint jars, depending on what we have and how hungry we are. And sometimes if we're having a bunch of veggies and stuff, I use 2 quart ones with pak choy and all kinds of stuff. If we're just doing a smaller meal, 2 pint jars or a quart is enough. Put them in there while the broth is still cold. Start it up, cook it low. They'll float. They're done.
Yeah, this would have gone a lot faster if we'd been able to use the commercially prepared wonton skins. But Irene made the wonton skins. They rolled out just beautifully in the pasta maker. She rolled them down to the number 5 setting on the pasta maker, and it worked great.
I actually like the way they manipulate much better than the commercial ones. The commercial ones frequently will crack.
And well, they get dried out.
Yeah. This, we did have a little bit of trouble, but what I did is I covered the dough with a wet, damp paper towel. Henry had that genius idea. And that's, I was busy working, and I was like, oh, this is getting too dry. And it's like, should we cover it with a damp paper towel? I was like, yep. A lot of recipes will just say something like just cover it with a bowl or something. We're too dry a climate for that. Usually if I'm going to cover it with anything, I'll cover it with either a damp towel or a damp paper towel or something else like that, or saran wrap even, because it just won't, a bowl by itself won't do the job.
Well, let's say goodbye. We've got to get these in the freezer so they don't get too warm.
Yep.
It is a pork product. It's been out now for about an hour. We want to get them stuffed away in the freezer.
Right. So until next time, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, because obviously we're going to be doing lots more.
We've been doing a lot.
Yeah, we just don't always video it. Some of it you've seen before. It's kind of like, how many times do you want to watch paint dry?
Say goodbye, Irene.
Bye.
Keep brainstorming.
Yeah, obviously we are.